I used to think I was pretty good at celebrating New Year's Eve. I had the countdown, the noisemakers, and
Yeah.
a pretty bad rendition of Auld Lang Syne.
Fair.
But then I found this group, the Members Church of God International.
MCGI.
Yeah, MCGI, and their whole Christian New Year thing. And now I'm not so sure about my New Year's Eve traditions.
It's definitely an interesting claim. They say the Christian New Year is on Nisan 1.
Right. Usually it's something in March or April throws a wrench in my party planning. Seriously, though, they say Exodus 12.2 makes Nisan the first month for the Israelites,
Yeah.
and they think all Christians should celebrate the New Year then.
Exodus 12.2. Huh. It's a popular verse. Let's see what it says. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. So it does say Nisan is the start of the year for the Israelites, religiously at least. But I think it's more about the calendar itself and saying everyone has to celebrate the New Year then.
So like a change to the calendar, not Happy New Year.
Exactly. And even in Exodus 12, the main event isn't the first of Nisan, it's Passover on the 14th. Plus, there's nothing saying Jesus or the early Christians celebrated Nisan 1 as a new year.
Okay, so the Bible doesn't say anything about a Nisan 1 New Year's party. And
Yeah.
even Jesus didn't celebrate it. So where did MCGI get this idea?
Well, that's where things get interesting. It doesn't seem like they came up with it themselves. It was actually taught by Herbert Armstrong. He founded the Worldwide Church of God.
Yeah.
So MCGI seems to have adopted the tradition, not discovered some biblical truth.
Wait, so they're taking a practice from another group and saying it's the real Christian way? That seems a little ironic. Don't they criticize other denominations for following a pagan calendar?
That's a great point. They're being a bit selective, it seems, or maybe even doing a little calendar appropriation.
Calendar appropriation, I like that. But you're right. It's funny how they criticize others for following a pagan calendar, but they celebrate their baptism day. They call it Sabbath day and use the Roman calendar. Isn't that like a calendar there again?
Exactly. And even the names of the Hebrew months come from other cultures, like Nisan. It comes from a Sumerian word. It means first fruits.
This is getting good. MCGI says they don't like pagan influence, but they seem to be picking and choosing. So we've got a group saying there's a Christian New Year based on a verse that doesn't say anything about celebrating.
Mm.
And they seem to have taken this tradition from another group.
Mm-hmm.
And they're against pagan influence, but not really. What do you think about all of this?
Well, looking at the bigger picture, MCGI might be more focused on being unique than on following the Bible exactly. These days, you have to stand out even if you're a religious group, so they might be trying to brand themselves.
It's like they found a niche in the religious market, and they're using this different doctrine to attract followers. It's interesting how social and cultural things affect even our religious beliefs.
Absolutely. And if you're enjoying this exploration of religious branding and identity as much as we are, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any more deep dives into topics like this one. And check out the next video in our playlist for more great content. But getting back to MCGI and their Christian New Year, they say they're just following the Hebrew calendar, like Jesus would have used.
Right. But we already talked about how there's no evidence Jesus celebrated Nisan 1 as a special New Year.
Exactly. It's like saying we follow the American legal system because that's what the founding fathers followed, but then making up laws that contradict the Constitution.
I like that analogy. They say they follow a system, but then interpret it in their own way. It's like they choose the parts that fit their story and ignore the rest.
Exactly. It's selective interpretation. And don't forget, even Jewish people don't celebrate Nisan 1 as the new year. They celebrate Rosh Hashanah on Tishrei 1.
Wait a minute. So the people who originated the Hebrew calendar don't even observe Nisan 1 as a new year. This is getting pretty complicated, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, let's break it down a bit. The Jewish calendar, like a lot of old calendars, has multiple new years. It depends on what you're talking about.
Multiple New Years. It's like trying to figure out my taxes.
Think of it like how we have different years for school, finances, and the regular calendar. The Jewish calendar uses Nisan 1 for religious things, like when the religious year starts and when festivals happen. But Tishrei 1, or Rosh Hashanah, is the civil new year. So even within the Hebrew calendar, Nisan 1 isn't the new year for everything.
So we have a borrowed tradition, a verse from the Bible being misinterpreted, a rejection of outside influences that doesn't seem very consistent, and a concept that's not even universally accepted within the tradition they say they're following.
That's right. It reminds us to always think critically about what we hear and to dig deeper, especially when it comes to faith.
This is definitely a deep dive. We've uncovered a lot, but there's still more to explore. So even in the Jewish tradition, There are different ideas about what a new year is, and that makes MCGI's claim even more complicated, right?
Definitely. It makes you wonder if they really understand the Hebrew calendar and how it can be interpreted in different ways.
And you talked about this branding era before, and how it affects religious groups. Can you explain that a little more? I'm interested in how this desire to be unique plays out in religion.
Well, think about it. We have so many choices these days. Everything from what cereal to eat to what religion to follow. So groups try to stand out, to be special. They want to be seen as unique.
So it's not just about having a message, it's about having an image, a brand that appeals to certain people.
Exactly. And sometimes that means adopting doctrines that make them different from everyone else. It's like saying, we're not like those other groups. We have the real truth.
It's like finding a niche market, but for religion.
Right. And MCGI's Christian New Year could be part of that strategy. It's something different that sets them apart from other Christian groups. It gives them a sense of exclusivity.
It's ironic. They criticize others for following a pagan calendar, but they seem to be borrowing and adapting things to create their own identity.
Yeah, it shows how tradition and innovation are always in tension. Even in religion, groups want to seem authentic and unique, which can lead to some contradictions.
And speaking of contradictions, we haven't talked about how this actually affects MCGI members.
You're right. It's one thing to debate theology, but it's another to see how it impacts people and communities.
So how does this Christian New Year affect MCGI members? Does it change their daily lives, their relationships, their community?
Well, one of our sources is a Reddit thread. It's from a group called Toxic Church Recovery PH. Former MCGI members talk about their experiences there.
Interesting. What did you learn from them?
A lot of them talked about feeling isolated. They felt pressured to follow the group's rules, even if it meant being away from family and friends who didn't believe the same things.
That sounds hard. Imagine not being able to celebrate holidays with loved ones because of religious differences.
Exactly. It shows how focusing too much on doctrine can cause division and conflict.
One person mentioned how expensive it was to attend all the required MCGI gatherings. Many are tied to their unique calendar. It shows that these beliefs have a real impact on people's lives. They're not just abstract ideas.
You're right. It's important to think about the overall impact of religious doctrines, not just the theology.
It seems like MCGI's Christian New Year, even though it's supposed to be a return to what the Bible says, can actually separate members from people outside the group, even their own families.
It does. And it makes us ask an important question. Does celebrating the New Year on a specific date, even if the Bible doesn't support it, really make someone's faith stronger? Or does it create unnecessary barriers and divisions?
That's something we all need to think about.
It is, and it leads to an even bigger question. What is the real purpose of religion? Is it about following a strict set of rules, or is it about connecting with God and with each other?
Those are big questions, especially today when religious beliefs are mixed with ideas about identity, belonging, and politics.
Exactly. And if you're finding this exploration of religious identity and belief as interesting as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more deep dives like this one.
We have a whole playlist full of interesting topics, but now back to MCGI and how their teachings affect their followers.
One of the sources talked about the emotional toll of always being judged for not following the group's rules perfectly. One former member said it felt like living in constant fear and anxiety.
That's sad. It sounds like a controlling and restrictive environment.
It does, and it makes you worry about manipulation and abuse within groups that value conformity and obedience so much.
Real faith should be about love, compassion, and freedom, not fear, judgment, and control.
I agree. And it's important to be aware of potential harm, even in religion.
We've really dug into the theological and social effects of MCGI's Christian New Year, but we haven't talked much about the psychology behind this need to be unique and exclusive.
That's an interesting area to explore. Why do some groups need to be different, even if it means creating division and conflict? What's going on in their minds?
That's what we'll be talking about in Part 3. We'll be exploring the psychology of religious identity, the appeal of exclusivity, and the dangers of groupthink. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We have been talking about the MCGI's Christian New Year. We've looked at whether the Bible supports it and how this doctrine affects people and society. Now we're going to talk about the psychology behind this.
It's interesting to think about people's need to belong, to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. We're social creatures, and that's a big part of why we form groups and identities.
Right. We all want to feel connected, like we're part of a tribe. How does that connect to the MCGI and their New Year's celebration?
Well, when a group focuses on being different, separating from the mainstream, it makes their in-group identity stronger. Members feel like they have special knowledge or insights that others don't. It creates a kind of us versus them feeling.
So by celebrating the new year on a different day, they're not just marking time. They're making their identity as a separate and, in their view, a more authentic Christian community stronger.
Exactly. It's a way of solidifying their beliefs and making their group bond stronger. And this exclusivity can be really attractive, especially to people who are looking for certainty and belonging.
It's like a reward system. You follow the group's beliefs and practices, and you get acceptance, validation, and a sense of purpose.
That's right.
When it comes to faith, blind acceptance is never the answer.
I agree. It's important to question, challenge assumptions, and look at different perspectives, even if they make us uncomfortable.
And most importantly, to remember that true faith should be about love, compassion, and understanding, not about dogma, division.
You said it perfectly. It's about connecting with something bigger than ourselves, not building walls and excluding others.
We've covered a lot in this deep dive into the MCGI's Christian New Year. We've looked at the Bible, the social effects, and even the psychology behind this doctrine. And we've talked about the importance of critical thinking, making your own judgments, and what faith really means.
And as we finish this episode, we encourage you to look at the sources we've talked about. You can find links to them in the show notes.
And if this deep dive has made you curious, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We have a lot more explorations into interesting and thought-provoking topics.
We've got a whole playlist of great content waiting for you.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.